Welcome, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Okay, all right. Everyone see my page? You have it in front of you, I hope. Let me know. Okay, you can see
Yes.
it. Great. Okay. So we can see that we're in the second Parsha of the book of Numbers, and this is Parshat Naso. I'm sure I've mentioned it in previous lessons, but it is the longest Parsha in the Torah. And it turns out to have as many verses as the longest Masechet in the Babylonian Talmud, which I believe may be Baba Batra. So over I think it's like 200 and something verses. So here we are. This is actually a very beautiful section here. And there's a lot of symbolism involved, but I don't think we're going to get that far into it. And by the way, this is the Torah reading for Hanukkah, and it has to do with the gift of the princes, each tribe's prince of the 12 tribes, of course, not counting the tribe of Levi, but there were still 12 tribes because of Ephraim and Manasseh representing Joseph, right? Ultimately coming from Joseph. So we still have 12 tribes, and these gifts, each one of them gave them a gift on each day. Each one brought on a separate day, they brought their gifts. And we'll get to them later, but this is the introductory passage. So, Vayhi bayom kalot Moshe. And so it was on the day that Moses completed lahakim et hamishkan, to erect the tabernacle, vayimshach oto, and he anointed it, by kadesh oto, and he sanctified it, ve'et kol kelav, and all its vessels, ve'et hamizbeach, the altar, ve'et kol kelav, and all its vessels, vayimshachem, he anointed them, by kadesh otam, and he sanctified them, he dedicated them. Now, there's something interesting about the way this word kalot is spelt, and Rashi's going to go right into that, because if you have a basic knowledge of Hebrew, you know it says, right, the completion of, that's what this means, right? But the word kalot, it should be kalot Moshe, Moses completed, but it's kalot Moshe. And that's a different version of, that is to say, grammatically, it's a different version. So there, when you have a possessive case in Hebrew, it's called smichut, which basically means connection. You're connecting one word to another. And here, under normal circumstances, as we understand this, it would mean the completion of Moses, right? It was the day of Moses' completion, and that should be klot with a shava, right? The two dots, right, underneath the kaf. That's how it would normally be spelled, but it's spelled with a patach. That's this particular vowel here. That's how the tradition says we need to pronounce this word. So here goes. Vahi bayom, say this, bayom, on the day, kalot Moshe. And he says, quoting Bamidbar Rabbah, the wonderful midrash on the book, in this case it's on the Torah and on the five Megillot, the Rabbot, the Rabbah Midrashim. So it says, the one on the book of Numbers says, Kalot Ketiv. In other words, the way it is written, right, it is Kalot. And parenthetically, the editor has said, Ritzono Lomar, what he means to say is Bepatach. Right? That's the name of this vowel. It's written with a patach, velo klot b'shava. It is not pronounced klot with a shava. And of course, that's this vowel here with the two dots. In fact, English has taken over this word shava, and it's called a schwa in English when you're dealing with English grammar, right? Vidok, and I think this actually means, and take note. So here goes. Yom Hakamat HaMishkan, the day in which the tabernacle was set up. Hayu Yisrael Kakala. Israel, the Israelites were like a bride. There's that word, kalot, right? as a kala, as a bride, hanichneset lachupa, who was entering the chuppah, the wedding canopy. So this little change of vow gives us a sense of an inner meaning here of the symbolism of the setting up of the tabernacle. It was the representation of a deep connection between the Jewish people and the divine creator. And that's what this tabernacle represented. It was like a wedding day for the Jewish people and the divine. And let's keep going. I actually do have some thoughts about this that have occurred to me relatively recently. And maybe I will take a moment now and not go on. All right. So I'm going to stop the share for 1 second. I've been meditating a lot on the Shema, right? That line, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, right? And as I've meditated of it, and I know I've shared this, but the fact that we have this term that, first of all, Yisrael in Shema Yisrael is addressing Jacob. That's who we're addressing. That, as it were, across the millennia, we are addressing the one who founded the Jewish people, because Abraham, of course, also founded Ishmael, right? He also, and others, and Isaac has Esau, but Jacob, just every single one of his children became part of the Jewish people. So we're addressing Jacob and we're saying, listen, Jacob, please hear. Adonai, that is to say, the Adonai, to my mind, is another word for the transcendent creator of the universe. In other words, as I've tried to meditate on what it means to be a believer, it's the understanding that we can explain pretty much everything physical. Consciousness, I think, still eludes us. How it is that as physical creatures, we nevertheless are conscious. And not only that, but the fact that there is something, the belief is that there is one ultimate transcendent, in other words, on a level totally different than this level in which we're living of reality. That is the source of everything else. That's Hashem. But what about Eloheinu? So notice it is our Elohim. And that is stating to Jacob that Adonai, this transcendent creator, is our Elohim in the sense that we accept, we are going to try to devote ourselves as much as possible to the acceptance of God's instruction through the Torah and the idea of the mitzvot, the idea of being commanded. And this is the part that depends on us, because as members of the Jewish people, it then becomes our choice to either accept the divine commandments or not. And that is through the mitzvot. Now, what happens when we are willing to accept the divine commandments? This is the idea of unity. You sometimes hear about the unification of God. But what we're doing is that when we allow our own lives to be directed by the commandments as they're found in the Torah and as our tradition has tried to interpret them, we are, in a sense, connecting ourselves to the divine and also unifying the divine with this world. We become, as I've used this word before, conduits of the divine into this world. And that is ultimately our purpose. And we're saying that just as Jacob and his descendants at his time were acting in this way, we are continuing to do that. We are, in a sense, reassuring our great patriarch that we have committed ourselves to the same purpose, right? Ultimate goal that he did as well. And this puts into context many of the laws, if not all of them, that we find in the Torah. That there are ways in which we are actually trying to show God our devotion and our love and and using the using the metaphor of a marriage, as we're doing right now, is another way of doing it. That we are marrying ourselves as individuals and ultimately as a people to the divine. And that's really what it is. And that's what we say when we're saying Adonai Echad. God, we believe the Lord is one. And that at this point, again, the other statements, that the fact that humanity does not believe, right? Doesn't even believe in a transcendent creator. But not only that, not only does not believe in a transcendent creator, but doesn't feel that there's any connection to the divine, that there's any um, sense of being commanded, all sort of splits, right? Separates the connection between the divine and this world. And in saying the Shema, we are trying to reassure, we are stating to Jacob that we are as committed as anyone else who is his descendant and descendants ultimately also of Abraham and Isaac. And that's why we can use this term, this metaphor of a marriage for this. And of course, it goes on to say, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And in some ways, that's a model for marriage as well, that we should love our partners as much as we can, with all our hearts, with all our souls, with all our mights, right, with all our abilities, etc. But that ultimately it is to the divine. And this is an incredible vision of something that I think is transforming. And it also, and there's another element to this, and that is how true are we to ourselves, and how true are we to our stated beliefs. And that's another kind of unification, that we're trying to become integrated as human beings between our stated beliefs and our practice. So this is a little bit of a development of the idea of what we just had right now, and I'm going to go back into the share. I don't know if any of you have any questions, but I'm very happy if you'd like to ask me some questions. Okay. All right. Well, please, anytime. Right. Okay. So then the fact that it says Kalot Moshe, right? It says Moses completed. Moses completed. This raises a question. Bezalel, Oholiav, and Oholiav, the Chol Chacham Lev, and it mentions all those wise in heart, men and women. Asur the Mishkan. They made the Mishkan, right? Why does it say only Moses? Why does it mention these other people as well? And Moses makes this completion all dependent on Moses. Doesn't mention the others. Why? The reason is that Moses devoted himself. He devoted himself. It means sort of to transfer his soul. He completely devoted himself regarding it, right? Lirot, Tavnit, Kol Davar. He examined when they were manufacturing the different parts. He examined the pattern and the shape of everything, Davar v'Davar, every single thing, every every element of the construction of the Mishkan, right? That people were making. Moses would examine it, right?
Mm,
Kamoshe Ahu Bahar, because he wanted to make sure that it looked just the same way that God had shown him on Mount Sinai. Lahor, Lahorot, Laoseh Hamalacha, so as to instruct the people who were performing the tasks, performing the work. Velo ta'a betavnit achat, and he did not make an error in one single pattern, one single shape. And we have this idea that devoting your soul in such kind of way, devoting yourself to something like this, uh, gives you a level of connectedness to it, right? So he says, "V'chein matzinu b'David," and we find this also applied to David, the same idea. Lefi shemasar nafsho, why? Because he was completely devoted al binyan Beit Hamikdash regarding the construction of the temple. Now we know that Solomon actually did construct the temple, but David did all the preparation. He made sure that all the various component parts were ready so that Solomon could put it together. But how do we know this? Shneimar, as it states in Psalm 132, Zachor Hashem leDavid, O Lord, remember David, et kol, I think it's anoto, regarding all his affliction, Asher Nishbal Hashem, where he swore to God. So basically, the psalm says that David would not let rest for a moment, right? He wouldn't rest for a moment until he saw that the temple could be built properly, right? So there's that Mesirat Nefesh, that idea of devoting yourself to that extent, etc. Lefichach, and for this reason, Nikra al Shmo, it is said about him. So we have the psalm verse that talks about the degree to which David was so devoted to the building of the temple. And later on, we have a verse that says that the temple is mentioned in connection to him, that his name is the one that's given regarding the construction of the temple. How do we know this? This is in Kings, the first book of Kings, right? Chapter 12. Ra'ah Re'eh Beitcha David. What happened was, we're referring the context of this actually, but look at this. Look at your house, O David. The house, of course, being the temple. And it's saying to David, right? Look at your, David, look at your house. David wasn't alive at the time. This actually happened after King Solomon was gone as well. And King Solomon had a son by the name of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam was not the wisest person in the world. And it was during the reign of Rehoboam that the nation of Israel was split in two, to the 10 northern tribes and the southern tribe of Judah and Benjamin. So, of course, King David was ultimately from the tribe of Judah. Solomon, his son, was from the tribe of Judah. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, was from the tribe of Judah. And basically, Rehoboam, when he became king, said, he basically, this is the phrase he used. He said, my father ruled you with, let's say, with whips. I'm going to rule you with scorpions. I'm going to be even tougher on you. And the 10 northern tribes says, in that case, we have nothing to do with you. We're taking off. And they left and were split from the southern tribe of Judah. Benjamin remained loyal, but so Judah and Benjamin in the south, and the 10 northern tribes up north. Right. So that's where this happened. But they said, when they were sort of making their statement that they were pulling out, they said, look to your house, David. And the fact that they used David, and David wasn't around, but the house of David is what the way we're referring to it. All right. V'yom kalot Moshe lakim. So on the day that Moses completed erecting, setting up, right? V'lo ne'emar b'yom hakim, right? It says on the day he ended setting up. It doesn't say on the day he set up, right? It says on the day he finished setting up. So this is telling you, Melamed, this teaches you, Shekol Shivat Yemei Hamaluim, that all the 7 days of the dedication of the sanctuary, the days in which the sanctuary, after it had been fully, completed as far as the construction, after its construction, and it was now being set up into service, right? These days, Hamiluim, Haya Moshe, Moses was Ma'amido u'mefarko. He would set it up and dismantle it, right? And I think all we need to understand is that he was supervising the setting up and the dismantling of the Mishkan. Remember, it was, it was a portable sanctuary. Over Otohaya, but on this particular day, the day we're referring to, He'emido, he set it up, velo parko, but he didn't take it down. He didn't dismantle it on this particular day. Lachach ne'emar, and for this reason, it says, Bayom kalot Moshe. That's why it's saying, on the day when Moses completed, right? Because in the previous days, he did not complete setting up the tabernacle, because he would set it up and then dismantle it, right? Lahakim, to set it up. Or tohayom, right? And on that same day, kalu hakamotov, the setting up of it came to an end. For Rosh Chodesh, and it turned out that it was the first of the month, right? Of Nisan. It was the first day of Nisan, Haya, and we see this, the proof is given in Tractate Gitin, page 60. Okay, so here goes. So it was the first of Nisan, and he says, Basheni, that would be, I imagine it would mean on the second day, Nisrafa Hapara. So on the second day of these Miluim, the red heifer, right, was burnt, right, to purify anyone who had that level of impurity. Bashlishi, on the third day, Hizu Hazaya Rishona. We know that in purifying someone who's been in contact with a corpse, they have to sprinkle the ashes of the red heifer on the third day and on the seventh day. And that's what he's referring to. So then on the third day of this Miluim, the ashes were sprinkled on anyone who had been in touch and come in contact with a corpse. And we know that in that particular case, even coming under the same canopy as a corpse will render a person require this particular act of purification. And Vashvi'i Galchu, and on the seventh day they were shaved. And this, I believe, is referring to the Levites, that we talk about how the Levites were shaved on that day. So I think this may be the right place to stop for today. And I've certainly tried to give you some things to think about. And so I'm going to pop that here. And you got the marking here, and I'm going to stop the share. All right. Any comments, any thoughts, etc.?
So if he stopped taking down the tabernacle,
Yes.
does the Mishkan,
Yes.
does that mean that they were permanently there? Is that the point, that they reached the land of Israel and they're now permanently there, or no?
It was now set up to start bringing sacrifices and offerings and things like that. In other words, it took 7 days in which to dedicate the dedication ceremony, if we want to call it that, took 7 days. And now, after the dedication was completed, it could be, in fact, you put to use in terms of bringing the offerings that were mandated or the personal offerings of individuals. It now was fully functional. That's all it means.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
right.
So why would they have to fold it? Oh, were folding it up before because they were still moving. Is that the point?
No,
Because you,
no, I don't think so. It seems to me that the reason why is that it wasn't functioning at that time. In other words, the reason for taking it down is because they weren't bringing sacrifices at that particular point. They were they were in a sense doing various things, and he mentions, that's why Rashi mentions, the need to create the ashes of the red heifer and to sprinkle people who needed to be sprinkled with it, and also the Levites themselves had to be dedicated. And that took this process of 7 days.
okay.
Yeah. So, but because the tabernacle itself wasn't being used as it subsequently would be, that's why that would seem to me to be the reason why he didn't leave it up, why he took it down, because it would make it very clear that the tabernacle was not functioning in its normal capacity at that point.
Got it. Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. All right. Any other thoughts? All right. I will stop the recording.